Hi guys, today I wanted to make a video talking about the new New Jersey legislation that recently passed that allows terminally ill patients to participate in physician-assisted dying. Physician-assisted dying is more commonly known as physician-assisted suicide, but I am going to refrain from using that terminology because that is used by opponents to the bill and it brings an extremely negative connotation to what the process is, why it is passed as a bill, and it just overall does not bring a positive light to the experience and the bill that is giving people a choice to die on their own terms. Physician-assisted dying is when a terminally ill patient which has a prognosis of 6 months or less is given the opportunity to get a prescription, a lethal dose of a prescription that will allow them to choose when they die. There are so many parameters, there are so many requirements for this bill and to be eligible for it, so I wanted to go through what makes somebody eligible for physician-assisted dying, or as I will be referring to it, dying with dignity, and what it entails. So there are only a handful of states that have dying with dignity laws, which include California, Colorado, the District of Columbia, Hawaii, Oregon, Montana, Vermont, Washington, and now just recently New Jersey. So that's 8 states and 1 district, so Washington DC, that have dying with dignity laws. Everywhere else it is illegal. So I read through the legislation that passed in New Jersey, and I will leave links down below to the legislation. It's only 21 pages. There is the main one that passed, and then there's also an earlier version of it. So I recommend that if you are interested or you want clarifications, to read through both documents. So a very big common misconception with dying with dignity laws is that anybody who's sick can just tell their doctor, I want this medication, and the doctor will just give it to them and then they'll die. Or another very heavy misconception, which happened when Oregon passed their laws, I think over 2 decades ago, or years and years ago, is that people were going to flock to Oregon to use this law because you have to be a resident of the state that has the law to be able to be eligible for it. And even though with all those misconceptions and what opponents of the bill like to say is happening, or as they call like a slippery slope, that actually is not the case. In Oregon, about 0.23% of deaths are done by the dying with dignity law, because there are so many parameters of it. So I'm going to be talking about the New Jersey law right now and what it entails and what you would need to go through if you wanted to exercise your right for such a procedure. So first and foremost, a person eligible for the dying with dignity law needs to be a terminally ill person with a prognosis and diagnosis of 6 months or less. They need to be dying. Most patients, I think it was 9 out of 10 patients, are already in hospice when they are eligible for the dying with dignity laws, or they choose to proceed with the dying with dignity laws. Unfortunately, illnesses such as Alzheimer's or dementia, you're not protected under that law, because the next major requirement of the dying with dignity laws is that you need to be of capable mind. If you are a person who is terminally ill with a prognosis of 6 months or less, but is not of capable mind, which means that you are not capable of making decisions for yourself and or being capable of taking the medication yourself, then you cannot go through with the law. You will not be able to proceed any further with it. You as the person, as a patient, has to be 100% capable of not only of sound mind, but you have to physically be able to take the oral medication that they give you. If you are incapacitated, a caregiver cannot give it to you, a physician cannot give it to you. If somebody does do that, they will be charged with 2nd-degree murder. That's how serious it is. So to be able to get this medication, you need to have your main physician come kind of go through the checklist of that you have a prognosis of 6 months or less, and then you also need a consulting physician to go through the same process and come to the same conclusion. So right there you need 2 doctors to come to that conclusion. You personally also need to make the first oral request of, I would like this medication. You need to make one oral request. And then 15 days later, you need to make an additional oral request that you would like the medication. As well as those 2 oral requests, you need to make a written request of the oral medication. Before the written request is even allowed to happen, your physician and the consulting physician need to make sure that your prognosis and your diagnosis are 6 months or less, that you are a sound mind, and if they have any hesitation that maybe you are suffering from depression or some sort of psychiatric disease or illness, they have to refer you to a psychiatrist and a therapist, who then, if you have to go through that step, they also need to approve that you are of sound mind to be able to go through with the medication, or just being able to obtain it. At the same time, your physician is also required to recommend other treatment options. They are required to recommend palliative care, hospice care, other options other than just medication that you can choose when to end your life. They are required to recommend it. And then they're also required to recommend that you tell family members or, next of kin that you're going to proceed with wanting this medication. When the patient chooses to make a written request for the medication, they need to have a witness. They need to have 2 witnesses there, and one of them cannot be family members, it cannot be the physician, it can't be anybody who works for the physician, it can't be a healthcare professional. The only instance where it could be somebody from a healthcare facility is if that person is currently living at a healthcare facility. So you need a witness that is totally third party when the patient is ready to make a written request for the medication. So once the patient has gone through the oral request, the written request, both physicians have determined that they are okay to get the medication. Once the physician has done all the required recommendations, and once you prove proof of residency, then the patient can be qualified for the act. They are a qualified terminally ill patient. That's what the bill has in quotes. Being qualified as a terminally ill patient is not solely based on your age, your disability, or your specific illness. The law, however, you need to be 18 years or older, but there are safeguards in place so there is no abuse or no neglect that goes on, so that patients who are older are being taken advantage of, perhaps by a family member or a healthcare professional of the sort. I'll also link this article or this paper as well of non-secular reasons why people don't believe in dying with dignity is because of the slippery slope mentality, because in the Netherlands a lot of older people, they fear that they are going to be taken advantage of because they're old and be forced into euthanasia. Unfortunately, I know that those countries are dealing with euthanasia as a whole, and that slippery slope has led doctors to have the ability to do maybe non-consensual choices in patients' healthcare, but in the United States that has not been an issue. As I said, Oregon, only 0.23% of people who have died use the Dying with Dignity Act. So I think in America there's still such a stronghold on using the law properly that the law has put safeguards into place to negate abuse and to stop people's worst fears of happening, that doctors are going to be able to just give people medication. They can't. The Dying with Dignity Acts specifically require that the patient themselves have to do it. If a doctor does give somebody that medication, it's murder. It's not in the law, and the legislation clearly states that it is considered a crime. So that's basically an overview of how a patient gets medication. Now, if you kind of just even think of the timeline of how long it takes, because you need to have at least 15 days between both oral requests, you're looking at probably a month until a patient gets the medication. And with the 6 month or less prognosis, the odds of people abusing this bill are slim, considering that in Oregon, yeah, 9 out of 10 people who choose to exercise their choice with this are already in hospice, which most people don't live more than, I think the average is about 70 days in hospice. So with the average time of hospice being only about 65 or 70 days, you're already at about 30 days for all the steps to go through with the Dying with Dignity laws to get the medication required. In Oregon, 1 out of 3 people who get the medication, they don't even use it. It's all about having the option. It's like another choice to have, because when you're terminally ill, you know, you're facing mortality. You're facing the fact that you're at the end of your road. It's no surprise, and I forget about this all the time, that we're all gonna die one day. And once reaching that point, once actually facing it, it's scary. And I think being able to have another option, you know, to go out with your autonomy, with your own dignity, I think that's so beneficial for terminally ill people. So the medication that they give the patient would be a form of barbiturate, which is a controlled 2 substance. So 1 out of 3 people don't use it. So if the person chooses not to use the substance after they've passed, the next of kin or caregiver is in charge of getting rid of the Schedule 2 controlled substance, which means that it's a highly addictive medication. They have to dispose of it properly. If not, it is a crime. So there are drug drop-off centers, or there are ways set up by the government to flush the medication properly or dispose of it properly. So it's very important that even if a patient chooses not to use medication, that it is still disposed of properly. I have always been fascinated with the concept of physician-assisted dying or dying with dignity. It's something that I never even knew was an option, and I never really thought it would be an option. And I remember, gosh, like years and years ago, I wrote a paper on it, like a persuasion or a comparison paper on it. And having to be a caregiver for somebody with terminally ill cancer, I am very much for this bill. I know for a fact that my dad would not want to take advantage of this bill, as most people don't want to, because nobody wants to die. I think that's something that people forget about, or they see that this bill gets passed and they think that there's going to be a ton of people rushing to go to the States and go use it. But at the end of the day, people don't want to die. Even when you're on hospice, like my dad believed that he was going to survive, or that there was a chance of survival, and he didn't want to die. And I think most people, even when you're terminally ill, have that concept. Personally, if I were in a situation where I had a terminal illness, I would want to use this bill. And I say use it, I just love the idea of being able to have a choice in not having to pass or to get sicker and more in pain, because, you know, my dad was kind of lucky when it came to the pain of pancreatic cancer, or just cancer in general. A lot of the times just morphine and oxys would work. There are so many people that I know, or that I've spoken to, that had loved ones who passed away in so much pain, and morphine wouldn't touch it, oxys wouldn't touch the pain. They wouldn't touch the pain unless they overdosed and died. Like, that's how much the pain was. And if I was ever in that situation, I would want, and I was in sound mind, because that's the #1 thing, I would want to know that I had an option to pass with dignity, with autonomy, and to know that I had a choice to end my suffering when I wanted to and I was ready to. And I think being able to plan and have that control, and to be able to gather your family with you, and to, you know, kind of to die the way you want to die, I think that's such a powerful experience, because we're all gonna die one day. And some of us are gonna die 100 years old in our sleep, but some of us are gonna die tragically through fatal illnesses, and I think being able to have that choice is so important. And I watched a couple videos from physicians, legislators, and people whose family members have exercised the dying with dignity laws in Oregon. And I remember one of the physicians said that people live longer, or they live even like healthier to a point, because they know that they have a choice of when they can pass. They have a choice. The disease is not in control anymore. They are in control. Because I think that's the worst part of a terminal illness, is that something else is taking your life away. Something that's usually horrible, and something that disintegrates your autonomy, your ability to move and to speak and to eat, and that is frightening for people. And I think being able to have a choice to say, no, I am going to die when I want to, with the people that I love, when I still am, you know, myself. I think that's, oh, it's so beautiful. I'm just so passionate about it. It's not suicide. Yes, you are killing yourself, but it's not negative. You are bringing it back. You're bringing death. You're bringing death from a terminal illness back to your control. You're dying with dignity. You're dying with your autonomy. You're dying with hope, because you're going out on your own terms. You're not letting an illness take every last bit of you. And just being able to have that choice, I think, is so important. And I am definitely going to be fighting more for more states to have this option. You know, 8 or 9 out of 50 states, that's not a lot. And I think just to allow people to have the choice is so important. So I hope you guys found this video informative, at least a little bit. Because so many states don't have it, I think it's not very talked about. It was never talked about in New Jersey. I didn't even know the bill was in works until it was passed. So I will leave all the links down below to the New Jersey legislator, to an organization that is pro dying with dignity, and then also the paper that I read that showed opposite arguments for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel for more caregiving, or like death, healthcare, just anything of the sorts. Just all this stuff is just so fascinating, and I'm so passionate about it. So thank you for sticking along for this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.